You're listening to Move to Thrash, a 12-episode series every last Friday of the month. Hello everyone and welcome to the first episode of Move to Thrash. It is happening. Yes, it is finally happening. I have a podcast, a space where I will be letting out some thoughts and opinions regarding metal and everything related to it, as metal has been and still is my passion, and probably, and without exaggeration, one of my reasons to exist. The intro music is called Terror Signal, an old-school death metal piece by Jacob Lizzotti. You can find his music on YouTube and Spotify. Back to the business. I have been dreaming of starting a podcast for eons, and I was going to officially do it a year ago actually, but I was too busy like everybody else, like who is not nowadays, and I was overwhelmed by a series of events, and I just didn't feel like doing it yet. Probably also because I struggled with the podcast name, trying to find something original that has not been used by anybody else. Then just like that, one day it came naturally. I somehow paid attention to the phrase I say every time I move a file to Thrash. I always say move to Thrash, and it makes me smile because I enjoy the wordplay every time. And just like that, I decided I'm gonna make something out of it. And here we are at the first episode of Move to Thrash. Episode 1. Space It Up. In this first episode, we will be taking a look at a topic that has been fascinating me for a long time, let's say so. And I've been catching it whenever and wherever I would find it. And I will be walking you through this with the assistance of some fascinating metal bands and albums. So it's a sort of album recommendation, let's say so. So, as the title of this first episode says, I'm actually talking about space. And Space It Up is nothing but another wordplay coming from Spice It Up. That's a totally unnecessary nerd detail, but come on, I really like it. So to be clear, space and space-related stuff has never been my favorite thing. Because I've never been that space dork, Star Wars fan, you know, those people who are completely obsessed with Star Wars and Star Trek and so on. I've never been that person. I've always preferred the ancient times. I like Norse and Celtic stuff, the medieval ages, ancient times, civilizations, stuff like that. This is really my thing. But I still remember the first time I read a book about space, as a child. It was quite a specific and a unique experience, let's say so. It completely absorbed me. It was so beautiful that I actually experienced it on a cosmic level. This is funny and hard to explain, but we metalhead know that. Cosmic experiences in atmospheric music. So if you know, you know. I'm not gonna teach you anything new. Then, of course, I grew up and became the metalhead I am. And again, I met space elements in the music I was and I am still listening to. I remember the first time I paid attention to those effects. I was listening to the Norwegian black metal band Limbonic Art, and it totally blew my mind. Because it was the first time ever I came across something like that. And I remember it was the album The Ultimate Death Worship, released in 2002. And it's probably not as rich in those elements as Epitome of Illusions, for example, another album by them released a few years before, but still it was an amazing experience and a total discovery for me at that time. It was dark and scary, you know, it's just you. Isolated completely and surrounded with those voices and synthesizers effects. Very beautiful. You're just surrounded with those weird voices and strange things in your own space, experiencing the cosmos at every single level. This album is an absolute banger and shows the genius of the use of synthesizers in metal music. With that being said, on a personal level, The Ultimate Death Worship is actually how I would define space metal. But generally, if we try and look for a definition to what is space metal, I don't think we would actually find much, because it simply came from rock music. Space rock has been popular for decades, considered as a subgenre of progressive rock and characterized by the use of reverb effects, synthesizers, lyrics about futurism, you know, space, science fiction, multidimensionality, and stuff like that. So I would naturally classify it back in the 70s as a subgenre of psychedelic rock. Hello Pink Floyd, yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. The effects in Pink Floyd music were really something new and weird at that time, in a good way of course. The Dark Side of the Moon is an absolute masterpiece on every level you can imagine. Like, can you imagine it's almost impossible to believe it was released in 1973? Definitely ahead of its time. And you know what? I feel like I have to give the credit to the British anyways, because there is no way I'm gonna dive into this without mentioning the glorious British space rock band Ozric Tentacles, even though it was formed 10 years after the release of The Dark Side of the Moon, which definitely normalized the use of space effects in rock music. This band is an absolute encyclopedia and probably a main source of inspiration to many metal bands. Can you imagine being this advanced in the early 80s? Like, yeah, I know, you would think the 80s are the golden age of synthesizers, but Ozric Tentacles is just way too advanced than the average electronic rock band. Plus, if we take a look at the use of synthesizers in rock music, we actually have to go back to the 60s with bands like The Animals. I remember the official video of House of the Rising Sun, and yep, the synthesizers were there. Bro was actually busy throwing some background effects. I feel like if I start looking in the 50s, I would still find them, but I don't want to make this episode 2 hours long, come on. So yeah, back to Ozric Tentacles. One day, actually I came across their album Arborescence, released in 1994, and I swear my soul left my body and disappeared in another dimension. I still don't understand what's going on in this album. It has a relaxing effect and some of the strangest sounds that have been ever used in music. There is a funny sound I call the penguin effect, because it literally sounds like penguin voices. It has such a peaceful effect on the mind and makes you imagine yourself in the Arctic, in the middle of nowhere, surrounded with snow and its noise cancellation effect. So beautiful. This album is a masterpiece. And I feel like after Pink Floyd normalized those effects, we started hearing them in more albums, as artists became so comfortable and creative crafting the best synthesizers rock. Steve Vai among them, of course, one of the best guitar players and music composers in the world. Such a creative guy who experienced with every genre you can imagine, and most of his effects are made with the guitar only. Among them, the space effects in Passion and Warfare, 1990. He's still around, doing a great job right now, along with Satriani. You're listening to Move to Thrash, a 12-episode series every last Friday of the month. Welcome back. Now that I've done my duty talking about rock music, let's move to metal music finally. In my analysis of a couple of albums, I noticed that metal is offering actually more to the space effect department. The major common point between those albums, or bands, let's say that so, is that most of them have a rustic and primitive lyrical theme, despite the use of futuristic effects, so it's a little confusing, right? Regardless of the fact that metal is extremely rich with the sound of synthesizers, bands that don't even need me to introduce them to you, like Children of Bodom, Dimmu Borgir, Gehenna, Amorphis, and the list is so long. One of the most remarkable and beautiful effects is that Darth Vader-ish voice, generally as an intro in the beginning of the song or even the album. Let's say I based all my selection on that. Recently I started listening to Nocturnus. Yes, I'm guilty, I know, I've been waiting for so long, but at least I did it now. And I came across their 1992 album, Thresholds. And it was probably the missing piece of puzzle to complete my glorious Darth Vader-ish effect playlist. According to a French article, Nocturnus from Florida, around since 1987, is actually the first band ever to have used the synthesizers as a full instrument equal to the other instruments. Not just that, they actually are also the first death metal band to have used science fiction and the climate question as a musical and lyrical theme. I was listening to Climate Controller the other day. It made me think, oh wow, these guys are ahead of their time. They addressed the climate change topic before all these teenagers sitting in the middle of the road and blocking the traffic in the name of climate were born. Like, man, I'm just so bothered with the stupid methods people are using nowadays to address the climate issue. And seeing how Nocturnus did it before made me think we as humanity are really becoming dumb. I just had to say that. And with the use of Uncle Google, I confirmed that they actually addressed the climate change topic effortlessly, beautifully, and without blocking the traffic. And guess what? They used actually that Darth Vader effect, let's call it so, in the beginning of the song, but also the whole album. And I swear, I've been listening to this album for days non-stop. It's actually the album of January. Next, we move from the climate cause and we return back to the rustic days with Butcher from Belgium and their album 666 Goats Carry My Chariot. Released in the cursed year 2020, one of my favorite extreme speed metal releases. Beautifully old school, yet with that same Darth Vader effect again, opening the album with the track Inauguration of Steel, followed up with that Celtic Frost and Hellhammer pure speed and hellish rhythm. I really don't know where do the words of their intro come from because they define the song as instrumental and they don't consider the words as theirs. So who knows which science fiction film is this? Probably Star Wars, I don't know. Unfortunately, I'm too not into the film to find out. What I know, though, is that the album cover is marvelous, designed by the unique and talented artist Chris Verwimp from Belgium as well. Next album. I don't feel I can talk about the space effects without mentioning the beautiful progressive and electronic metal band Arion from the Netherlands. I have to confess that I am not the best person to talk about this genre because I generally don't target it. It's not my goal in metal, let's say so. My goal has always been discovering death and black metal bands, let's say extreme metal bands, mainly death metal actually. But when I find albums like Into the Electric Castle, aka a space opera, released in 1998, I can only stop by it and show appreciation. Long, complicated songs with massive and beautiful space atmosphere, but I'm gonna just talk about the song The Amazing Flight, with that voice effect again, but less harsh than the Butcher and the Nocturnus one. And it starts with a beautiful text I'm gonna read to you. There is danger ahead, but do not be afraid, for I'm with you, like breath itself. Darkness will lead to light. Color will bleed into the night. Beautiful colors, the like of which you have never seen. Let the dream of confusion lead you into the virgin light. Be gone, be all-seeing, be brave. One of the best introductions I've ever heard in my life, followed up with an old-school rock sound, the Jimi Hendrix style. The vocals were done by a guest singer called Jay Van Vegelen. Hopefully I'm not pronouncing it bad, according to the internet if I'm not mistaken. I have to confess, when I listen to songs like this and they give me that instant healing effect, I feel like people are wasting their money actually on modern day therapists, which I prefer to call scammers. I think an introduction like this can heal the hell out of you inside and out and for free. Anyways, next is the self-titled EP album by the American old-school heavy metal band Medieval Steel. And here I am going back to the contrast between ancient and futuristic spatial items. These guys are ahead of their time while they're anchored in the very past. Space effects in the opening of the track Medieval Steel itself is glorious, while the song talks about glory and battles from the past. And think about it, that was in 1984, back when these guys officially started their career. And they're still around. They recently released a new album, Blood Moon, one of the most talked about actually, and the best of 2024 according to the community. Well, something though is not clear. They worked with the keyboard player John Roth, who's done some keyboard effects for them since 1985, but they never mentioned who did it before. So we don't really know who was around before and who did those space effects. But the work on that album is absolutely remarkable and impossible not to talk about. So I'm here exactly for this, doing my duty and recommending Medieval Steel the album to the world. Last but not least, an album that I got into recently is Violent Creed of Vengeance, released in 2023 by the Canadian epic heavy metal band Smolder. Apart from the album cover that slays, with that Conan the Barbarian energy by the artist Michael Whelan, someone told me later that the vocalist is a woman, Sarah Ann. Apparently also a well-known active metalhead who writes reviews, etc. So it's just a whole amount of information that made me like this band even more. And of course, the space elements are here, in the song Victims of Fate, always opening the track and preparing to descend from space to the ancient times, just like with Butcher and Medieval Steel. Something out of this world that I've been collecting in one of my Spotify playlists with the name Space It Up, which actually inspired me to make this first episode. That's it, people. The glorious space effect, sometimes combined with the Darth Vader voice effect provided to you by metal music, where the genius is at its highest. Thank you so much for sticking around, and I will for sure be back with another episode and expect some guests. Until next time, move to thrash.